There is a moment that happens in estate buying offices across America almost every single week, and it is one of the most painful things in this entire business to watch. A woman walks in holding a small box. Inside is a brooch that belonged to her mother, or her aunt, or a grandmother she barely remembers. She is driven across town to find out what it is worth. And before she left the house, she did what any reasonable, well-meaning person would do. She cleaned it. She wanted it to look nice. She wanted to show respect for the piece. Maybe she soaked it in warm water with a little dish soap. Maybe she used a silver polishing cloth she found under the sink. Maybe she dropped it into one of those little ultrasonic machines her son bought her for cleaning eyeglasses. And the buyer on the other side of the counter picks it up, turns it over once, and knows immediately that the piece just lost a significant portion of its value, not because of anything that happened over the last 60 years sitting in a drawer, because of what happened in the last 20 minutes at her kitchen sink. That is the part almost nobody understands. In the vintage and antique jewelry market, the damage that costs sellers the most money is not age, it is not scratches, it is not even missing stones, it is well-intentioned cleaning. And the cruelest part is that it is almost always permanent. You cannot put foil back behind a rhinestone. You cannot put metal back onto a plated surface. You cannot restore nacre to a pearl once it has been stripped. There is no undo button. So today we are going to go through 7 specific categories of old jewelry that you should never clean before you sell them. Not clean carefully, not clean gently, never. I am going to show you exactly how to recognize each one sitting in your own jewelry box, exactly what the cleaning does at a physical level, and exactly why a trained buyer pays less the moment they see it. And at the end, I am going to tell you the one thing you should do instead, which costs nothing and takes about 4 seconds. Before we get into the 7, you need to understand why a buyer thinks the way they do, because once you understand this, everything else makes sense. When you look at an old piece of jewelry, you see something that is dirty and dull and could look better. When a professional buyer looks at that same piece, they see a document. Every mark on it is information. The dark oxidation sitting down in the recesses of an engraved pattern tells them the piece genuinely has age. The soft mellowing on the high points where a thumb rubbed it for 40 years tells them it was worn and loved, not manufactured last year in a workshop that fakes antiques. The exact color of the tarnish on the back tells them something about the alloy. These are the signals that say authentic. Now, when a piece arrives freshly polished, all of that evidence is gone. And here is what goes through the buyer's mind, and I want you to really hear this, because it is not what most sellers assume. The buyer is not thinking, "How nice, this is clean." The buyer is thinking 2 things at once. First, I can no longer verify age from the surface, so I have to be more conservative on price. And second, if this seller polished it, what else did they do to it that I cannot see yet? That second thought is the expensive one. A polished piece signals amateur handling, and amateur handling makes every buyer in the chain assume there may be more damage hiding underneath. They protect themselves by offering less, so the loss is doubled. You lose the actual physical value that the polishing removed, and then you lose again on the discount the buyer applies for uncertainty. Now, I want to be honest with you about one thing, because you will find people online who disagree, and they are not entirely wrong. There is a real difference between removing heavy black tarnish and removing patina. Heavy, crusted, pitted black corrosion actually damages metal and can obscure the maker's marks, and no serious dealer wants that either. Light, even toning is different. It is the aged glow that sits in the low spots of a design. A gentle wipe on a plain, modern, solid gold chain is genuinely not a problem, and anyone who tells you all cleaning is always catastrophic is overstating it. The categories I am about to give you are the ones where the risk is not a matter of opinion. These are the pieces where cleaning does measurable, physical, irreversible harm. Let us start with the one that costs American families the most money every single year. Number 1. Any costume piece with foil-backed rhinestones. If you have a sparkly brooch, a clip earring, a bracelet, or a necklace made roughly between the 1920s and the 1960s, there is a very high probability the stones in it are foil-backed. Here is what that means. The manufacturer took a clear or colored glass stone, and on the underside they applied an extremely thin layer of metallic foil, almost like the backing of a mirror. That foil is what makes the stone throw light back at your eye. It is the entire reason vintage rhinestone jewelry has that deep liquid sparkle that modern pieces struggle to match. The stone itself is just glass. The magic is the foil. That foil is sitting maybe 1/100th of a millimeter behind the stone, and it is not sealed. Moisture gets behind it with almost no effort at all. And once water reaches that foil, the foil oxidizes. It turns cloudy, then gray, then black. Collectors call these dead stones. And I want to be very clear about this, because sellers get this wrong constantly. This cannot be repaired by cleaning it again, or by cleaning it more carefully, or by drying it faster. Once the foil is gone, the only remedy is having a specialist physically remove the stone and refoil or replace it, which for most pieces costs more than the piece is worth. There is a second problem stacked on top of the first. In an enormous amount of vintage costume jewelry, the stones are not held by prongs at all. They are glued in. And the adhesives used in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s are frequently water-soluble. So the same soak that kills the foil also releases the glue, and stones start dropping out. A piece with 3 missing stones is not worth a proportional amount less than a complete piece. It falls off a cliff because collectors of signed costume jewelry buy condition first and design second. How do you recognize this in your own drawer? Turn the piece over and look at the back of the stones. If you can see straight through the stone from behind, it is open-backed and it has no foil, and it is much more forgiving. If the back of the stone is closed off with metal, or you see a silvery or gold mirror-like surface behind the glass, assume it is foiled. And if you see stones that already look dark, cloudy, or dead compared to the ones around them, that piece has already been soaked at some point in its life, and there is nothing to be done about it. The instruction here is simple. No water, no soaking, no spray bottles, no ultrasonic machine. Not even a damp cloth pressed against the stones. If dust bothers you, a completely dry, soft makeup brush across the surface is the absolute limit. Number 2. Anything with pearls, and I mean both real pearls and vintage faux pearls. Pearls are the softest thing most people own. A pearl sits at about 2.5 on the hardness scale, which means it is softer than a copper penny. The surface of a real pearl is nacre, which is a layered organic material that the oyster deposits in extremely thin sheets. That layering is what produces the depth and the glow. It is also porous. It absorbs. When a pearl goes into an ultrasonic cleaner, 2 things happen simultaneously, and both of them are bad. The vibration and the heat attack the nacre directly, and the cleaning chemicals get absorbed into the material. The result is a pearl that comes out looking flat, chalky, and slightly gray. That luster does not come back. There is no polish that restores it because you have not dulled a surface, you have removed material. If the pearls are on a strand, there is a second casualty. Traditional pearl strands are knotted onto silk thread. Silk absorbs water, stretches, weakens, and holds moisture against the drill holes of the pearls, which is where the discoloration usually begins. Many sellers have soaked a strand, hung it up to dry, and come back to find the thread has stretched, the knots have gone slack, and there is a yellow ring forming at every drill hole. Now here is the part people do not expect. Vintage faux pearls are just as vulnerable, sometimes more so. A quality faux pearl from the mid-20th century is a glass bead coated in a pearlescent finish, and in the better pieces that finish was applied in multiple layers by hand. It is a coating. It chips and it dissolves. Soaking a strand of vintage faux pearls will often produce beads with bald patches where the glass shows through, and that turns a collectible signed necklace into scrap. Recognition is straightforward. If it looks like a pearl, treat it like a pearl, whether it is real or not. And a quick note on identifying real versus faux. The classic test is to rub the pearl lightly against the edge of your front tooth. A real pearl feels slightly gritty because of the nacre layers. A glass or plastic imitation feels perfectly smooth. That test costs nothing and damages nothing. Number 3. Antique sterling silver where the design has depth to it. This is the category where the disagreement I mentioned earlier gets most heated, so let me be precise about it. I am not talking about a plain, smooth, modern silver chain. I am talking about pieces where the design has recesses. Victorian repoussé work, Art Deco pieces with engraved geometric lines, anything with an oxidized black finish deliberately applied by the maker to make a pattern read. Niello work, Marcasite pieces, anything hand-engraved. On these pieces, the dark oxidation sitting in the low areas is not dirt. In a great many cases, it was put there on purpose by the manufacturer because the contrast is what makes the pattern visible. Silver polish does not know the difference between accidental tarnish and intentional oxidation. It removes both. What you get back is a piece where the engraving has gone flat and the design has visually collapsed. Collectors describe this as a piece that has been washed out, and it is one of the fastest ways to lose value on antique silver. There is a mechanical problem as well. Every single pass with a polishing cloth or a polishing compound removes a microscopic layer of metal. On one occasion, that is negligible. Repeated over decades or done aggressively once with an abrasive paste, it softens crisp edges. It rounds off detail that was originally sharp, and critically, it can blur or erase the hallmarks. Those tiny stamps on the back are how a buyer establishes maker, country of origin, purity, and often the decade. A piece with a legible maker's mark and a piece with a smudged one are not in the same price bracket. Marcasite deserves its own warning inside this category. Marcasite pieces have dozens or hundreds of tiny faceted pyrite stones, and in most vintage examples, those stones are glued or press set into small cups. Polishing compound gets packed into the settings and cannot be removed, and any liquid attacks the adhesive. Marcasite jewelry with missing stones is extremely common precisely because of well-meaning cleaning. Recognition. Look for depth. If the design has valleys, and the valleys are darker than the peaks, leave it exactly as it is. Number 4. Anything gold-colored that is not solid gold, which is most of it. This one catches an enormous number of sellers because the piece genuinely looks like gold. Gold-plated, gold-filled, vermeil, and the various gilt finishes used on costume jewelry all present the same to an untrained eye. But structurally, they are a thin gold layer over a base metal, usually brass or pot metal or zinc alloy. And on standard costume plating, that layer can be under half a micron thick. To put that in perspective, a human hair is roughly 70 microns across. You cannot polish something that thin. There is nothing to polish. Any abrasive action removes the gold layer entirely in the places you rub hardest, which are the high points, which are exactly the places the eye lands first. What you get is a piece with pink or gray patches showing through on the raised areas, and once base metal is exposed, it begins to corrode, and that corrosion spreads under the remaining plating from the edges. The most expensive version of this mistake involves signed costume jewelry from the great American makers. Miriam Haskell, for example, is famous among collectors for a proprietary finish often called Russian gold, a warm gilt plating formula that reportedly contained genuine 24-karat gold along with copper and other components. That finish is a defining characteristic of the brand. Collectors specifically hunt for pieces where it is intact and unrubbed. Polish a Haskell filigree and you have not made it shinier. You have removed the single feature that identified it and priced it. The same logic applies across the signed costume market. The original factory finish is the product. There is also a chemical trap here that circulates widely as a household tip. The aluminum foil and baking soda method, where you put silver in hot water with foil and watch the tarnish transfer. That method works through an electrochemical reaction, and on solid sterling, it is reasonably benign. On plated or costume pieces, it is destructive. It attacks gold plating, it loosens glued stones, it corrodes base metals, and it will strip a gilt finish in minutes. Recognition. Check the wear points first. the edge of a ring shank, the back of a pendant bail, the raised center of a brooch. If you see a different color metal peeking through anywhere, the piece is plated. Also, check the weight. Plated costume pieces feel lighter than their size suggests. Number 5. Porous and treated stones, specifically emerald, opal, and turquoise. These three are grouped together because they share one property that makes cleaning uniquely dangerous. Each of them is either porous or routinely treated in a way that cleaning can undo, or both. Emeralds are the clearest example. Emeralds form with natural internal fractures, and the overwhelming majority of emeralds on the market have had those fractures filled with oil, resin, or wax to improve apparent clarity. This is a completely standard, disclosed industry practice. It is also not permanent. Heat and vibration drive that filler back out. When an emerald comes out of an ultrasonic cleaner having lost its oil, the fractures that were previously invisible suddenly become visible as white lines running through the stone. The stone did not break. It just stopped hiding. But to any buyer looking at it, the clarity grade has collapsed, and so has the price. Opals are vulnerable in a different way. Opal contains water within its structure, and it responds badly to sudden changes in temperature and to mechanical stress. The failure mode is called crazing, which is a network of fine surface cracks that spreads across the stone. It is permanent, and it usually kills the play of color that made the stone worth anything. And a great many vintage opal pieces are not solid opal at all. They are doublets or triplets, which are thin slices of opal glued to a dark backing and sometimes capped with clear quartz. Put a doublet in water, and the glue layer fails, and the stone delaminates and goes cloudy from the inside. Turquoise is porous in the most literal sense. It drinks. It absorbs oils, chemicals, and dyes. Much of the turquoise in mid-century jewelry has been stabilized with resin or, in cheaper pieces, dyed to deepen the color. Soaking it in a detergent solution can pull color out unevenly, and it can leave the stone permanently darkened where it absorbed the liquid. The Gemological Institute of America is explicit on this category, listing organic and porous materials including pearl, coral, amber, and ivory, along with heat-sensitive and treated stones including emerald, opal, turquoise, lapis, malachite, tanzanite, moonstone, and topaz as materials that should not go into an ultrasonic cleaner at all. That is not a marketing opinion. That is the standard reference position of the industry's main gemological authority. Number 6. Enamel work and japanned metal. Enamel is powdered glass fused onto metal with heat. When it is intact, it is beautiful and it is durable in normal wear. But on a piece that is 70 or 100 years old, there are almost always micro cracks in the enamel that you cannot see with the naked eye. Water gets through those cracks and sits between the enamel and the metal underneath. The metal then corrodes, and the corrosion lifts the enamel off in flakes. This can happen days or weeks after the cleaning, which is why so many people never connect the two events. Ultrasonic vibration is worse still because it can propagate those existing micro cracks outward until a whole section lets go. This applies to guilloche enamel, the type with the wavy engine-turned pattern showing through translucent color, which is common on Edwardian and Art Deco pieces, and on vintage compacts. It applies to cloisonné. It applies to the painted enamel on a great many mid-century signed brooches. Japanned metal is the other half of this. Japanning is a hard black lacquer finish applied to metal, and it shows up constantly in Victorian Revival costume jewelry and in mourning-style pieces, including a number of well-known signed designs. That black finish is a surface coating, not a property of the metal. Solvents dissolve it. Polishing removes it. Underneath is ordinary base metal, and a japanned brooch that has been polished down to raw metal in patches is very difficult to sell to anyone. Recognition. Any colored glassy surface, any deep uniform black finish that looks painted rather than oxidized. Dry cloth only, and never over the enamel itself. Number 7. Anything with a coin mounted in it. This is the one that surprises people the most, and in terms of dollars per mistake, it may be the worst on the list. Mounted coin jewelry is extremely common in American families. a silver dollar in a bezel on a pendant, a gold coin set into a ring, a bracelet of small silver coins. These were popular gifts for decades. Here is the problem. When you have coin jewelry, you frequently have two separate values sitting in the same object. There is the jewelry value, and there is the numismatic value of the coin itself. And in the coin world, the rule against cleaning is absolute, and it has been absolute for a century. Cleaning a coin destroys its collector value, not reduces, destroys. A cleaned coin gets labeled as such by every grading service, and it is removed from the market that pays serious money. The reason is that a coin's surface carries original mint luster and natural toning, and both are extremely fine surface phenomena. Any rubbing, any abrasive, any chemical dip leaves microscopic hairline scratches or strips the toning, and graders can spot it instantly under magnification. On a common coin, this may cost very little. On a scarce date, a scarce mint mark, or a high-grade example, the gap between an original coin and a cleaned one can be the difference between a routine sale and a genuinely significant one. So if you have coin jewelry, the sequence matters enormously. Do not clean it, and before you sell it as jewelry, have somebody who knows coins look at the coins specifically. Sellers have handed over mounted coins for melt weight when the coin itself was the valuable component. So what should you actually do instead? Here is the entire answer, and it takes about 4 seconds. Nothing. Take a dry, soft cloth and remove loose dust from the surfaces that are plain metal. That is it. That is the whole procedure. No water, no soap, no polish, no paste, no dip, no ultrasonic machine, no baking soda, no toothpaste, no aluminum foil. If a piece is genuinely filthy in a way that obscures what it is, take it to the buyer dirty and let them decide. A professional dealer would rather receive 100 grimy original pieces than one polished one, because they can clean it correctly if it needs it, and they cannot unclean it if it does not. Handing over a dirty piece costs you nothing. Every experienced buyer expects it. Handing over a polished piece costs you real money, and it costs it permanently. And if you take only one idea away from all of this, let it be this. In almost every other market you have ever participated in, presentation raises the price. You wash the car before you sell it. You paint the room before you list the house. The vintage jewelry market runs in the opposite direction, and that inversion is exactly why so many people lose money without ever realizing it happened. Here, originality is the product. Age is the evidence. The dust is not the problem. Leave it alone. Let the buyer see exactly what 60 years actually looks like. That is what they are paying for.